Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wednesdays with Winthrop Jr., episode number 6. And this letter was written, again, from John Winthrop Sr. to his son, John Winthrop Jr., on August 12th, 1623, and it was written at Groton, England. And he writes, "My dear son, Lord bless thee, and multiply his graces in thee, to the building up of that good work which, I well hope, is truly begun in thee, and wherein I rejoice daily and bless God, who hath pleased to call thee, and keep thee in that good course, which yields hope to all thy friends of thy future happiness. Be watchful, good son, and remember that though it be true in some cases that principium est dimidium totius, yet in divinity he who hath attained beyond the middle must still think himself to have but new begun. For through the continual instigation of Satan and our own proneness to evil, we are always in danger of being turned out of our course. But God will preserve us to the end if we trust in him and be guided by his will. Principium est dimidium totius in English means the principle is half of the whole. We can start a project or begin a course of action, begin a course of action with the best intentions, but completing the project or staying the course will complete the cycle. And not everybody does this all the time. A lot of times people will lose interest or start to wonder why they started the project to begin with. I'm guilty of that. John Sr. applied this theory to a spiritual journey with God by telling John Jr. to go beyond the middle hump when circumstances and situations arise that were not planned, and stay the course unwavering all his life. Keep his eyes on the prize, being God and eternal happiness, though Satan will continue to offer temptations." Then John Sr. goes on to write, "I receive no letters from you, since that in Latin where you wrote for Cooper's dictionary, which I sent you since by London, and have wrote twice since." It seems that maybe some of John Jr.'s responses to John Sr.'s letters are maybe not available. We don't know why they're not available until at least 1626, but there could be the reason that he wrote in responses in Latin and were not maybe as interesting to the reader of those letters, which would be too bad, because if that is the case, then there's somebody there that could actually translate those letters. And I wonder if John Jr. again wrote in Latin, sometimes to keep up with the language, though it was no longer spoken as an everyday language. John Jr. would still want to keep it fresh for himself because the Latin terms were used for biology and in medicines. This knowledge was needed for his growing interest in alchemy and later his medical practice. Though he would have been very familiar with these Latin terms early on while hanging with those Phones relatives of his. Don't forget, Thomas Phones, his uncle, was a pharmacist, so to speak. And Cooper's dictionary was actually called Thesaurus Linguae Rominae and Britannicae. Again, I'll say that again. Thesaurus Linguae Rominae and Britannicae. Thomas Eliot, a scholar, author, and diplomat, started to compose this Latin to English dictionary, but sadly he died in 1546 before the project was completed. And Thomas Cooper took over the endeavor as he was becoming more of a public figure himself, and he revised the work 3 times. Thomas Cooper was an ordained minister and a practicing physician at Oxford. So therefore, because he was a practicing physician and he was writing this stuff and the printing press was starting to come around, John Jr. and the people of the larger communities were starting to get wind of these books being published. So of course, the advertisement and learning and everything started to become expanded. But Thomas Cooper lacked confidence that he had enough knowledge of Latin to complete the task. However, Queen Elizabeth believed this the most complete Latin dictionaries of all time for that time. And even though some believe that Cooper copied directly from other sources, the fact remains that Cooper greatly improved on Eliot's initial work, and the dictionary was part of the teaching sources of the day at Cambridge and other colleges because the professors spoke in Latin to educate their students. And Cooper also paid tribute to Eliot in the original edition. Cooper's dictionary was originally printed at the London home of Henry Denham at the time, again, that the printing press was invented. So today, that dictionary actually sells for upwards to £2,000. John Sr. goes on to write, I purpose to send you by this bearer, Samuel Gosselin, a piece of turkey grosgain about 10 yards to make you a suit, and I shall have a piece of good cloth against winter to make you a gown. All my care is how to get it well conveyed. John Sr. believed that shipping at those times, especially across the ocean, was hazardous, and it was. So he was just concerned that his son wasn't going to receive the goods that he's going to send him. Grosgain is a fabric mixture of silk and wool, which was stiffened with gum. Antonio Secchi gave a great in-person presentation regarding Puritan clothing for men on the live event of this video. And I'm going to ask you to please visit Historical Garb and Cosplays on TikTok to hear more on what Antonio actually does. And the link will be provided in the comments section as well as in the description. I thoroughly researched all my sources and found almost nothing on Samuel Gosselin, except that he was the brother-in-law to Jane Winthrop Gosselin and was a tenant on the Groton estate. John Sr. encouraged Samuel to move to the Mount Rath plantation with the Downings. At the same time, John Sr. was considering a move to Ireland himself. Again, that would have been about 1622, 1623. I believe Samuel was also a cloth maker or employed somehow in that business because of a transaction listed on John Jr.'s accounts in July of 1631 when he paid Samuel 12 lire for cloth. John Sr. goes on to write, I would have sent you some other things with some remembrances to your aunt and cousins, but that the occasion of sending this messenger was so sudden as I could not provide them. If your uncle come over to Chester, you may come with him, and there I hope to see you. Be directed by him and your tutor, for though I much desire to see you, yet I had rather hear of your welfare than hazard it. Again, he was concerned about the travel going over the Isle of Man, connecting Trinity College at Dublin and Groton Manor. And if your uncle mean to come further than Chester, I would wish you not to come over now, for I am not willing you should come to Groton this year, except your uncle shall much desire your company. I assumed that the uncle that's traveling to Chester would be Uncle Emmanuel Downing, as that is the uncle with whom John Jr. is living, as you know from previous episodes. The hazard refers to the fact that the entire trip, again, crossing the Isle of Man to get from Dublin to Chester, but today that's about an 8-hour car ride. So can you imagine what that would have been like back in 1623? A long journey. And I also imagine that the travel was unpredictable. The uncle who would have loved a visit from John Jr. was probably Thomas Gosselin, which was Jane Winthrop, her husband. Remember my kind love to your good tutor and to Mr. Downs, and excuse me to your aunt that I write not to her, for I have not leisure. and if occasion be, impart my joy at her safe deliverance, which we long much to hear of. So Emmanuel Downing's wife, the sister of John Winthrop Sr., Lucy Winthrop Downing, is pregnant at this time that the letter was written, and she's pregnant with hers and Emmanuel's oldest child, even though Emmanuel had children from his first wife. And the child that Lucy is pregnant with at this time is going to be George Downing. The actual date of his birth is unknown to me. We do know, though, that George emigrated to Salem about 1638, only to return to England in 1645 as the captain of the ship taking the scenic route to conduct some business. So it's pretty shrewd. George was a minister, and he was appointed military chaplain during the English Civil War. Later, however, he didn't want to always perform those ministerial duties. George delayed the opening of Parliament in 1657 because a minister who was supposed to be there was actually missing in action. So they turned to George, and he said, no, I'm not going to do that. So I don't know what happened after that, but I just find that very interesting. George Downing died in 1684, the year after his noble wife, Frances Howard Downing. And then John Sr. closes his letter. What remains, this bearer can inform you of all our affairs. Put him in mind, as from me, to be sober and beware of company. Your grandmother and mother salute and bless you. Your uncle Gosselin and aunt salute you. Your bastard Bury, to whom I wish you to write at your leisure. Your good host and hostess salute you also. John Winthrop, Groton, August 12th, 1623. Thank you very much, and I will hope to see everybody next Wednesday night for the live presentation of Wednesdays with Winthrop Jr. It's going to be a good one. Thank you very much.